Hormonal birth control pills. Are they really the source of all evil like Instagram health coaches, hormone experts, and period gurus would have you believe? I'm Mama Dr. Jones, a board-certified OBGYN and mom of 4, and today we're going through viral birth control claims from Instagram, as well as addressing some of the tactics that people use to spread misinformation about contraceptives on the internet. Come with me as we jump down the contraceptives are poison, but buy my potion instead Instagram rabbit hole. My debunking of particular people's misinformation is not meant to encourage you to go to their page or say something nasty to them. Don't do that. Take the information, take what you learn about the tactics that people are using to spread misinformation, put it in your brain, discuss in my comments below if you'd like to, and just use that to bring up information and discussion with your doctor or advanced practice provider. Every time I talk about things like this, people say, oh, well, they do this because some doctors are bad and some doctors only give people birth control and do nothing else. And I am not denying that there are bad doctors out there, and I am not denying that some people don't do well or have bad reactions to hormonal birth control. The existence of those things, bad doctors, side effects on birth control, does not justify sharing blatant false information in order to gain a profit from something that you are selling, or even just in an alarmist fashion to make people scared. Those two things both should not exist. The existence of one does not justify the existence of the other. The period you get on hormonal birth control is not a real period. This is a common trope that you will see in the anti-hormonal birth control communities. They all like to pass it around. The premise here is that you don't have an actual period on hormonal birth control, because when you have a cycle, it's actually just related to a sudden drop in the hormones from stopping your active pills and moving to your placebo pills. While that is technically true, the same exact thing happens in your menstrual cycle. When you have an ovulation, you create something called a corpus luteum, which is a cyst on the ovary. It produces progesterone. The corpus luteum has a life cycle of almost exactly 14 days. After you get to those 14 days, if an embryo hasn't implanted in the uterus, the corpus luteum suddenly dies. And what happens when it suddenly dies? The progesterone levels drop. You have a withdrawal bleed from a drop in progesterone. This is exactly the same as when you have a withdrawal bleed from stopping your active pill and moving to your placebo pill. There is nothing magical about one happening with hormonal contraceptives and the other happening in a natural cycle. Bloody fact, it's impossible to have a period while on the pill. Same story, different verse. You will notice them reusing the same idea or topic or something that someone said that got a lot of attention over and over and over. I often wonder if they must have some Discord server where they're just like,
this week, we should tell people that their period isn't real if they're on a contraceptive pill.
Doctors will hand out birth control like candy without ever telling a woman that it depletes them of the very nutrients needed to conceive or have a healthy child. 10 years later, these same women are left with no answers as to why they can't conceive. Call me crazy, but that's criminal. I'm not going to call you crazy, but it is categorically false that birth control is associated with infertility or an unhealthy pregnancy. That's just not true. 80% of people will be pregnant within 1 year of coming off of oral contraceptive pills, which is the same percentage as the general population who's never been on hormonal contraceptives. Contraceptive use should always just be viewed neutral. There are some risks, which we will discuss in this video. There are some benefits. You weigh those risks and benefits and decide for yourself. I think it should always be a red flag if someone seems to be overly attached to birth control pills and make you feel like everybody should be on them. It should also be a red flag when people are sharing alarmist information and seem to demonize or villainize a medication. It just doesn't make any sense. You'll notice a theme as we go through some of these. They'll often start with an alarmist statement and then make another statement which actually is true but leaves out some really important information. Did you know birth control is extremely toxic? Birth control is not extremely toxic. That's just false. It is a medication that can have side effects in some people and can be really great for other people, and has been associated with many cancers. So what's the truth about birth control and cancer? Birth control is associated with cancers. Being associated isn't the full picture, right? Because things can be associated in that they increase the risk or decrease the risk. Hormonal contraceptive pills are associated with being protective or reducing the risk of ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, and colorectal cancer. And those reductions in risk last at least 30 years after you come off the medication. On the other hand, there is temporary association with maybe having an increased risk of getting diagnosed with breast or cervical cancer. Those risks are short term. So if you combine somebody's overall lifetime risk of being diagnosed with cancer, the people who've been on hormonal birth control pills are either at an equal or lower risk of being diagnosed with cancer at any point in their life. Saying they have an association with cancer is technically true, but it doesn't really give the entire story, and I think it's really important that entire story be given. You'll also notice if you scroll down on the caption of this post, did you know that most women with a healthy cycle menstruate with the moon? Birth control severs this connection. I don't think you need me to tell you that that's just nonsense. People don't menstruate with the moon, and birth control cannot sever your connection with the moon. There are some cultures that have a belief about menstruation and the moon, and if that's a cultural thing that you are associated with, that's totally fine, but it's not a literal thing that happens, and also birth control has nothing to do with it. Do I need to have a period? My doctor says a period is not necessary. She goes on in the caption to write, but Nicole, my doctor says it's fine, and I've read articles from other doctors that also say it's fine. Well, I'm here to tell you that's BS. Having a healthy ovulatory menstrual cycle is a necessary and regular period is part of the deal. That's technically true if you're not on any hormonal contraceptives, but it's not necessarily true if you are. In a world where this is a controversial topic, I'm committed AF to giving you nothing but the truth about periods and hormones so you can make informed decisions about your body. First off, this isn't controversial. There is absolutely no literature to indicate that the act of ovulation itself is necessary for long-term or even short-term health. I did want to test this person on their claim that they are committed AF to giving the truth to you about periods. So I went and listened to the podcast episode that they are promoting with this Instagram post. I will never get that time back, but I'll tell you what the premise of their argument is. The basis of her argument is that because the endocrine production, meaning in your body production of estrogen and progesterone, two hormones that are integral to your health and well-being, are tied to the act of ovulation, this means the act of ovulation itself is necessary for overall health. This is another tactic that they use. I have a statement which is true and another statement which is true, and I'm drawing a conclusion from it that those two statements cannot draw on their own. So while it is true that if you are not regularly ovulating and don't have a reason for that, such as pregnancy or breastfeeding or menopause or being on hormonal birth control pills, and it can be a sign of underlying issues, and it also can cause major health problems, it is not because the act of ovulation is missing, it's because the estrogen and progesterone are missing. But that doesn't apply when you're taking those hormones in the form of a birth control pill. Excuse my bluntness, but I am positive that you're not on hormonal birth control with no side effects. I actually love this one because I'm sure that if you looked around on this person's page, you could probably find somewhere where they're complaining about doctors gaslighting people who are on birth control pills and telling them that there's no way their pill caused a side effect and saying how terrible that is, which I agree with. But it's also not okay when done in reverse. I think this post really hits home the truth that a lot of these people are more interested in demonizing birth control and convincing you that you should go off of your birth control than they actually are about giving you real evidence-based information. So she goes on to say, I'm not the biggest fan of hormonal birth control. Why? Because it's the main option we're given to take charge of our fertility and fix period problems with very little education on what it actually does to our body. I actually agree with her that we should be providing more information. That fact does not support the hormonal birth control bad narrative. It supports the education good narrative. Why might some of these people be more interested in convincing you that hormonal contraceptives are bad and you should stop taking them than they are in actually providing you the full picture of information? Well, if she can convince you that your birth control is bad and get you to go off of it, then she can also sell you her course on how to stop your hormonal birth control at the low cost of $99. Here's a tip, and I won't even charge you $99 for it. If you don't like your hormonal birth control and you decide to go off of it, make an alternative pregnancy prevention plan if you need it and stop taking the pills. It's really that easy. The next few discussion points are made in the same carousel. The last few slides are the ones that are repeatedly used behind a separate initial slide on many, many accounts. Some we've already talked about here. I like this one because it was sent to me about 100 times and it is reused over and over and over in so many of these people's accounts. Birth control has ruined millions of women's health and nobody is talking about it. I hardly think nobody is talking about this considering I just wrote a 13-page outline of everything I wanted to tell you all about what people are saying about it, but go on. Haha, very funny meme. They're setting us up for this, right? They've made a statement, an inflammatory statement about how birth control is running people's lives and they're appealing to your emotion and something that is actually quite relatable of pulling a package insert out and going, this is wild. They're doing this thing where they establish a reason for you to believe them, they make you emotionally feel like you should believe them, and then they make statements that are partially true and draw conclusions that have nothing to do with that and are blatantly false. Cutting the signal from the brain to the ovaries. Birth control delivers a large dose of synthetic estrogen and progesterone. Increasing these hormones suppresses LH and FSH, the communication line from the brain to the ovaries. They have led with a really great description of exactly how hormonal contraceptives work. That's an accurate description. But they have done that to establish, look, I'm telling you the truth, and followed it with falsehoods. In some women, this communication never returns. This can lead to many long-term permanent side effects. That communication is not permanently severed, and none of the things that they list are associated as being long-term health issues from being on hormonal contraceptives in the past. It's just blatantly a lie. This one, they're just going to outright mislead you. Risk number 2, excess estrogen can be carcinogenic. They go on to explain excess estrogen can be associated with cancer and all of these things. They've stated a truth with alarmism. Excess estrogen can cause cancer. This is a truth stated in an alarming fashion. They've followed that with some overall truths about estrogen itself. But what they've not done is tell you that these risks of excess estrogen are when estrogen is taken alone without progesterone. No birth control is estrogen by itself. This is not applicable to what we're discussing. And the type of cancer that excess estrogen causes is uterine cancer, which birth control pills, if you'll remember from earlier, are protective against. They then go on to throw in a description of the Women's Health Institute study, which is a study on estrogen and progesterone in postmenopausal hormonal replacement therapy. And they say that it had to be halted because of the increased incidence of breast cancer. They throw this in randomly, and I thought, why would they do this? And then I realized it's because they're trying to draw in this idea that combined hormonal contraceptives are dangerous and cause cancer. But this finding from the Women's Health Initiative is a completely different discussion. This is postmenopausal women who are on hormonal replacement therapy. And the breast cancer they're discussing is actually related to the progestin side of that study. Like, it is a truth. That truth about the study is true, but it is absolutely not applicable to hormonal contraceptive pills in premenopausal people because these are postmenopausal people on hormone replacement. And it's absolutely not applicable to estrogen as the cause because the finding was that progestin was the concern. When I started going through these, I just was like, my gosh, because it looks so legitimate. If you don't know that study by heart like I do, then you don't know what they're saying and it looks terrifying. Risk number 3, estrogen is a stressor. No, that study on rats did not come to a conclusion that hormonal contraceptives are bad. Excess estrogen is toxic to the liver. Anything in excess can overburden the organ that is meant to break it down. And estrogen is no different. In excess, your liver might not tolerate that well. Liver side effects from taking hormonal contraceptive pills are exceedingly rare, and many of them are inconclusive in the actual data. Risk number 5, reduces progesterone. For females, progesterone is life, and birth control robs you of this hormone. Yes, that's why it's included in hormonal contraceptives. Number 6 is my favorite because they love to talk about this. It's this study that basically said being on hormonal contraceptives might change your pheromones, which are subconsciously influencing the partner that you choose. And they love to cite this study as if it means we're all just out there picking the wrong partners because we're on hormonal contraceptive pills, which is nonsense, right? Because that completely removes the logical thinking that goes into picking your partner. Your frontal lobe has not just been erased because your pheromones have changed. No, no, you didn't just pick your partner based on pheromones. This is so stupid. They go on with tips for women who are coming off the pill. They list a whole lot of things, and they end with the climax of this weird post, which is move to an island in the middle of nowhere with someone you love and swim daily. You're coming off the pill. Is the person you're moving to the island with actually the right person? You don't know. Their pheromones might have been different because you were on a hormonal contraceptive pill. Maybe we shouldn't move to an island with that person. Could be a bad idea. So this post is one of my favorites because it allows them to not have to justify their actual position by making the position they are speaking against seem really outrageous and polarized. They list a bunch of things that we're told and then what the truth is. It's the only way to prevent pregnancy. That's what we're apparently told. Then all they have to say is, no, there's other choices, which yeah, nobody has ever made the argument that there's not. That's not the argument. It's okay to start trying for a baby the month you quit birth control. That's what we're told. And then they go on to say depletion of nutrients. No cited sources, just another statement. It is okay to start trying for a baby as soon as you come off of contraceptive. There's absolutely no reason that's not okay. The next slide is side effects, and it's really scary when you glance at it. Again, they're trying to appeal to your emotion here. Yes, there are side effects that can happen from birth control, but this looks very scary. Even on the package inserts, it will list this was less than 5% of people, or extremely rare, less than 1%. Let's just throw them all together. You know, it's like purposefully meant to look scary, and it's intellectually dishonest. So this person had a bad experience with birth control, and I get it. It's not for everyone, and everyone who starts hormonal birth control is not going to end up loving it. Nobody should feel like they have to be on hormonal birth control, but the fact that some people really don't like it or don't do well on it does not erase the fact that for some people it can be really life-saving or really important or even just neutral. She goes on to do the exact same thing as a person in the last post, and in her caption says, stop believing that the pill is the only way to avoid pregnancy. Nobody believes that. Nobody thinks that it fixes or treats hormonal issues. Birth control pills absolutely can treat some hormonal issues. If you have premature ovarian failure, hormonal contraceptive pills quite literally treat your problem. They don't fix it, but everything doesn't have a fix. They treat the problem. Of course, we shouldn't just put people on hormonal contraceptives without any look into what might be causing their problems, but there are some situations where masking the symptoms quite literally makes people able to live their life. So I definitely understand that there are people who have just been given hormonal contraceptive pills as a band-aid with no other options, and I don't think that is okay. And I definitely believe we should be looking into the cause of people's problems, but sometimes the end answer is we can't reverse what has already gone wrong, or we can't fix it, but we can help with your symptoms so that you can feel better. And for some people, hormonal birth control does that. And if you scroll down, you will see that we're selling a $20 hormone course, as well as Plexus, an MLM company, which has far less science on the effectiveness and safety than hormonal contraceptive pills. By the way, almost all of these people are selling something. I've only touched on a few of them specifically, but I went into every single one of these pages, and with very few exceptions, almost all of them are selling something that would directly benefit from you believing that hormonal contraceptive has in some way destroyed something in you and they can fix it. Medically induced nutrient deficiencies. Can the birth control pill cause nutrient deficiencies? In some situations, the answer to that is yes. We have lots of data on the fact that hormonal contraceptives might cause nutrients to be lower in some people. For most people, that doesn't happen. For people who it does, it's usually not a clinically significant decrease and you're not going to have any side effects from that. However, if you do, it's not permanent and you can supplement your diet if you need to. Libido changes are possible, but not a universal experience. And then the risk of blood clots being increased is true, but is still significantly lower than the risk of blood clots in pregnancy, which hormonal contraceptive pills prevent. Hardly a reason to say it should not be used. Hormonal contraception, birth control pills, IUD, etc. doubles the risk of suicide in women aged 15 to 33. The diagnosis of depression and antidepressant use is also increased, but these are handed out like candy to young women with no education about the risks. So this is an important post for sure, and an important discussion to be had. However, it still lacks the very important nuance that this discussion deserves. There is actually one very well done Danish study that indicates that being on hormonal contraceptive pills might increase the risk of suicide. Importantly, there are other studies which have looked at this and failed to come to that conclusion, but I do think the Danish study is very well done. She actually misquoted the data though. The data actually said that the hormonal contraceptive pill doubles the risk of suicide attempt and triples the risk of suicide completion. Non-users of hormonal contraceptives had a suicide attempt rate of about 1 in 1,000. People who were started on hormonal contraceptives, that increased to about 2 in 1,000. For suicide completion rates, we're looking at numbers like 6 in a million on non-users to 19 in a million for people who were started on hormonal contraceptive pills. So it tripled the risk. For sure, important information, I think really needs to be given in a way that makes the risk more understandable than just saying double or triple. It also doesn't serve the idea that these shouldn't be used. It speaks to the importance of screening people for underlying side conditions, of talking about any family history, things like that, and of discussing with patients that if you are feeling different after starting this medication, you need to let us know. There needs to be follow-up and checking in and making sure everybody understands that this is a risk, albeit relatively small, and that we should take you off of it if you start feeling like you have worsening mental status after starting the medication. So the next slide has some unscientific info about hormone balancing. It basically lists a bunch of things that are good for you to do and that people should be doing. Balancing hormones, as most of you know, is not a technical definition. We can't just look at blood work and go, oh, your hormones are balanced. People use this as a buzz phrase to sell that natural is better and to get you to do things that are overall healthy for you and probably make you feel better, and then convince you that that balanced your hormones. This is nonsense. Birth control pills contain the most dangerous form of iron. So I like this one because it's just blatantly false. Most contraceptive pills don't have iron in them at all, and the ones that do have something called ferrous fumarate, which is not a dangerous form of iron. It's just a form of iron that is used as a supplement. The ones that have iron in them typically only include them in the placebo pills. So you have the hormonal pills for 21 days or whatever, and then 7 days of an iron pill that's just an iron supplement to take. Due to our body's iron recycling system, we literally only need 1 milligram of dietary iron each day, and each pill contains 74 milligrams. Yikes. It gets a lot of this wrong. She talks about 74 milligrams and how that's so incredibly excessive. Dietary iron is different from absorbed iron, and the 1 milligram she's quoting is absorbed. You need to eat quite a bit more than that to absorb that much. That 1 milligram of absorbed iron is not the right number. Most people who are reproductive age having menstrual cycles need about 2 to 2.5 milligrams of absorbed iron a day. The 75 milligrams of ferrous fumarate converts into about 25 milligrams of elemental iron. That's like what can actually be processed by your body, and then you absorb about 10%. So that's 2.5 milligrams of absorbed iron, and you're only doing this for 7 days out of the month max. This is in no way an excessive amount of iron supplementation. So as you get familiar with these tactics, you'll see some commonly reused tweets and information that keep popping up, and this is one of them. It's a tweet from this person that went viral about an entire generation of women was prescribed birth control, and now they have PCOS and hormonal imbalance and depression and infertility. There is absolutely no evidence that contraceptive pills contribute to causing PCOS or hormonal imbalance or infertility. That's completely false. Throughout the remaining pictures in this 5-picture carousel, she will never readdress the fact that she just posted something that implies that birth control pills cause PCOS, hormonal imbalance, and infertility. You've made a statement and then drawn a conclusion and not given any support for the conclusion that you drew. It just feels extremely manipulative to make these claims. In the next slide, cite sources that back up the one claim that actually has any validity. validity to it without ever overtly stating there's no science to back up any of the other claims that I just posted. And in fact, the infertility one has a significant amount of data to say that it does not have an association. All of these studies I'm linking below if you're the data person that wants to look at them. Fun fact, sex is more enjoyable when you're not on hormonal birth control. First of all, that is not a fact. And second of all, this is Students for Life, an anti-abortion group trying to convince you to go off of your hormonal birth control and have sex. This makes no sense. If you are anti-abortion, you should be pro lowering the need for it. This just made me angry. How you could be against abortion and then encourage people to have sex with no protection, beyond me. Where's the consistency? Live Action doing the same thing. This is a sign to get off your hormonal birth control. Another anti-access to abortion group who is telling you to go off of your contraceptive pills so that you can get pregnant and they can demonize you for having an unintended pregnancy that you don't want. Absolutely disgusting. If you are going to be against abortion, please just at least be pro getting people access to contraception. Many of these inflammatory accounts, they really serve to do exactly what they accuse healthcare professionals of doing, which is not providing the full information. The point is not necessarily that all the information is blatantly wrong, but that it is given in such a way to lead you to a conclusion that may not actually be a conclusion that needs to be drawn from what they're saying. I also find it concerning how many of these people are selling products or supplements or ebooks that directly benefit from convincing you that hormonal contraceptives are bad. I see birth control as a net neutral. Benefits, risks, you get to decide. Thank you for being here today. I hope that you learned something. If you did, leave a like on this video, hit subscribe, turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. I will see you next Monday.